All right, we're running a little bit behind schedule, so I'm not going to do a long introduction of our speaker, who is not here in person. So for those of you who aren't aware, we have protection of critical infrastructure and government civilian side is tasked through the Department of Homeland Security. And CISA is the designated organization within DHS that does this and responds to various kinds of incidents and problems. I'm great. Can you hear me, Mr. Wales?
Yep,
you're on mute.
Got you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Thank you. So he is going to speak to this. When we extended the invitation, things were not quite as they are now in the world, and particularly in Ukraine. And as a result of what's been happening there, you can imagine the tempo needed within government operations has increased. He graciously agreed to speak to us nonetheless, although at a distance, cannot take the time out to come and spend the day with us. There is a long bio in the program, so I'm not going to recap all of that. I will say he's been with DHS for 17 years and was the person involved in responding to the solar winds incident, the Colonial Pipeline incident, as the acting director of CISA. So he has a real wealth of experience. He's going to share some of that with us today. And if you can stay a few minutes longer, although we ran long, then we may also be able to take some questions at the end. So without further ado, Mr. Brandon Wales, the Executive Director of CISA. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. Really pleased to be here. And after listening to the awards that were just given out, clearly among some of the best minds and brightest minds in cybersecurity in the country. I'd like to congratulate CERIAS on celebrating its 30-year legacy of Purdue's cybersecurity work. It's quite remarkable to think about the history of CERIAS in the context of what cybersecurity looked like back in 1992, what it looks like today, and I'm sure what it will look like 30 years from now. March, in particular, is a notable time to reflect on this, since it calls to mind the first ever public malware, the Michelangelo virus, that rocketed around the world to computer users even before there was a modern internet. I think it's fascinating to look back 30 years to think about how that played out in its day, since it really was the first virus that ever received kind of media, public media attention. And there was coverage of Michelangelo that talked about a time bomb left in people's computers that was going to lurk in the shadows and then unload on March 6th of any given year. The media kind of had hysterical reporting about it. And it also featured, interestingly, when we talk about solar winds, an early supply chain compromise because several vendors actually shipped out products that contained the virus. Cybersecurity advice at the time said relatively simple things like reset your computer clock to the wrong date so that it would never hit March 6th, or just don't turn your computer on March 6th. Fortunately, that scare kind of went out more with a whimper than a bang, though it actually did persist for several years worth of March 6s. The world returned to normal in time to replay the hysteria again around Y2K. But I kind of look back at that as kind of highlighting just the ability for us to be prepared for unforeseen events. And whether it's 30 years ago or today or 30 years from now, people are going to be looking for and relying upon experts and leaders in this field to help them deal with the uncertainty, helping them understand what they need to do to prepare to defend against and resolve the cybersecurity threats that we face as a country and as a worldwide community. The recent announcements from the White House highlighting new intelligence that the Russian government is exploring options to conduct cyber attacks against the United States should serve as a warning to all of us that these threats continue to persist and the obligation we all have to address them. As Eric noted, the tempo is increased here fairly substantially. In February, President Biden designated DHS as the lead federal agency on domestic preparedness and response. And I was tapped to be the senior response official to lead the US government's domestic efforts associated with this Russia-Ukraine crisis. So it's a really busy time, and CISA is right at the center of the action. We're tracking the rapidly changing landscape, and we are looking and monitoring the security threats to our critical infrastructure. We're also continuously exchanging real-time information with the cybersecurity, our partners in the public and private sector, and hopefully providing resources to help businesses of all sizes assess their cyber defenses, secure their systems, and ensure that they have resilient and effective cyber defensive strategies. And with much of the nation's critical infrastructure owned and operated by the private sector, it is just essential that we work collaboratively with all of these partners to protect the homeland. We actually started working on the potential Russian invasion of Ukraine back in late 2021. When we started to initially launch an outreach campaign to raise awareness about the potential growing threat environment and to help organizations think through what they need to do to prepare for that. So we launched a Shields Up campaign to encourage organizations of all sizes to adopt a heightened cybersecurity posture, provided classified and unclassified briefings, really unprecedented level of engagement. I went over some of the statistics yesterday for a briefing for members of Congress, but we did over 90 engagements over the course of about 3 months. We literally briefed about 1,000 people at a classified level in the private sector, and tens of thousands at the unclassified level to make sure that they understood what kind of threat we are now facing and what they needed to be prepared for. And then we released a series of products that were designed to kind of help them do their jobs better. Some of those products were more geared for the higher end network defense community in terms of our technical mitigation and advice. Some of it was working with our private sector partners to collect a catalog of free services that is available from the government, from open source community, from our joint cyber defense collaborative partners that is made available to those small and medium-sized businesses in those small communities to make sure that they had the ability to protect themselves in a resource-constrained environment. We're also working extremely closely with our colleagues in Europe and in Ukraine themselves, helping to exchange actionable information to help Ukraine defend its networks. And we've also conducted a series of bilateral sessions with the heads of the key cyber emergency response teams on the front lines across Eastern Europe: Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Estonia, the Czech Republic, as well as the 16 CERTs that comprise our closest partners globally as part of the International Watch and Warning Network. The goal, again, is to make sure that whereas if any one of us sees something, every one of us can benefit from it. I think, our primary goal in CISA is that no attack is successful more than once. That as soon as one person sees it, it can be shared, whether anonymously or not, and it gets out to the community, and new defenses, new mitigation measures, new compensating controls we put in place so that it doesn't repeat. And I think now more than ever, the American people are counting on leadership, both at the national level and all the way down into the corporate community, to successfully navigate this incredibly complex threat landscape and find solutions they can depend upon. And we fully understand that there is no easy answer to these problems that we are facing in cybersecurity, and no organization has all of the solutions. Success for everyone requires collective resolve of the public and private sector leaders to join forces, to be committed partners, and to be the staunch defenders of our critical infrastructure that is required given the threats we face. And frankly, that's why partnerships are at the heart of the CISA mission. So our agency, for those who don't know, it was only formed a few years ago, back in 2018. And our responsibility is to serve as the lead for protecting critical infrastructure, whether that's physical and cyber, the people that underpin it. We serve as the operational lead for federal cybersecurity, working to protect the federal civilian executive branch, and coordinating across the entire U.S. government the critical infrastructure, security, and resilience mission. And in these roles, we are charged with tackling some of the biggest challenges facing both government and industry, whether it's securing large federal networks and industrial control systems, or responding to incidents in both the public and private sector. And that is really why we were purpose-built as a modern cyber defense agency designed to build and operate really robust networks of public and private sector partners who need to work together to strengthen our defenses against both of these cyber and physical threats. And I'm really proud that I've been part of this effort, helping to build and mature its capabilities, and considering the rich legacy at Purdue and at CERIAS and the world-class cyber leadership that you have shown and demonstrated. It is really invaluable opportunity for me to speak here. So thank you again for the invitation. So I want to spend a little bit of time today highlighting some of our key initiatives here and the work that we are doing, including work that we are doing internationally with our partners globally. And I also want to give you a glimpse into how the achievements of you, the students who are taking part in this symposium, really will help chart the future of cybersecurity. And I'll obviously shamelessly ask that you consider joining a career in CISA, since we are always looking to expand our ranks with talented cybersecurity professionals. But I want to start with partnerships, since I, kind of closed with it a few minutes ago, and just it's so essential to what we do here, and we really are looking to kind of dramatically change how we handle our partnerships. And last year we established something called the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative to lead the development of integrated cyber defense plans with both the government and industry, and it joins the authorities, capabilities, and talents of the government, both CISA, the NSA, FBI, Cyber Command, DOJ, the Department, the Director of National Intelligence, really with the amazing expertise of industry. And we brought together, as part of the kind of core Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative members, 25 of the most important companies in cybersecurity and technology, whether those are the major cybersecurity firms, the technology firms whose equipment helps protect tens of thousands of customers throughout the country, the major cloud providers, the major internet service providers, those people who can take collective action at scale. And it provides us shared situational awareness of the threat landscape. So instead of people sharing information bilaterally with CISA and then us kind of taking that piecemeal from one or two or three different folks and then trying to share that information out, we now have created kind of a many-to-many relationship using kind of open shared technology platforms, so that as soon as one of those companies is seeing something or one of the government agencies is seeing something, we can drop it into a Slack channel and everyone in this community can benefit from it, begin to add their own insights and expertise on top of it. And so we can kind of create this better shared situational platform and this collaboration that will allow us to take collective action. And this is going back to my earlier point, where there's no one person who has, no one company, no one agency who has the ability to have the level of insight that we do when we operate collectively, and the ability to take action to make changes in networks that then get deployed and protect hundreds of thousands of individual customers throughout the country, or tens of thousands of critical infrastructure companies that rely upon these cybersecurity and technology companies. So really the power of coming together is astounding. But we're also bringing in the expertise of other parts of the federal government that have kind of unique domain expertise in certain sectors. So the Departments of Energy and Treasury and Health and Human Services and Transportation, bringing their unique subject matter expertise to the table as we work through our cyber defense plans. It really enables us to be well positioned to take the concrete actions, because we've brought together the right level of expertise in the government, whether it's on cybersecurity, whether it's on the individual sectors, or whether it's the technology and cybersecurity companies. In addition to establishing the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, we also got a host of new authorities in 2020 that has enabled us to really increase our understanding of the threat landscape and take action more quickly. So, for example, being able to more quickly identify the companies that may have internet-facing vulnerabilities and work with them to close those down, expand our opportunities to provide cybersecurity education and training throughout the country to grow the cybersecurity workforce, to establish a new cybersecurity advisory committee to help us think through what are the challenges we're facing today, and to develop strategies to ensure that we are well postured for the future. But we've also been working to expand our international collaboration as well. And given the really dynamic global threat environment and the threat landscape that we face around the world, it is critical that the U.S. government is continuously developing and expanding partnerships to ensure we have the right insight into that threat environment. And an example of these partnerships are with academic institutions such as CERIAS. And I know back in 2021, you all working through the Department of State, hosted several workshops and cybersecurity challenge weekends with cybersecurity critical infrastructure professionals in Ukraine, using open source information, guidelines, best practices. And those are exactly the kinds of initiatives that we want to foster in the United States and around the world. And it's why we're so committed to working with foreign partners to build out their capacity and strengthen both our own ability and their ability to support our cybersecurity work and critical infrastructure resilience more generally. In 2021, we actually released our first international strategy called CISA Global, which outlines how we want to work with our international partners to fulfill our responsibilities, execute our work, and create real unity of effort within these critical mission areas. We outlined kind of our four main goals, things like advancing operational cooperation, building partner capacity, strengthening collaboration through stakeholder engagement, and shaping the global policy ecosystem that is so critical to the development and maturation of cybersecurity norms. And as part of that, we've hosted a series of exchanges with technical experts around the world on a variety of topics, things from healthcare and emerging technologies and medical devices, ransomware, election security, mis and disinformation, industrial control systems. And those are really just the beginning. And a lot of that is based upon the demand signal that we get from our international partners, where they're seeing challenges and where they may need assistance and where they want to grow new capabilities and new capacity. Obviously, we also regularly communicate and coordinate with our closest allies, the US, the Five Eyes of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, all who have very similar cybersecurity and critical infrastructure security programs, and allows us to share information very quickly. We've also continuously released joint cybersecurity advisories with a number of our Five Eye partners, and actually in December did our first ever all Five Eyes joint sealed cybersecurity advisory on mitigating the vulnerabilities associated with the Log4j library. And we've actually started to embed personnel globally in our Five Eye partners cybersecurity agencies, and actually this year we're deploying our first permanent CISA attaché in the United Kingdom to really build kind of lasting relationships in Europe. But it also transcends down into the Western Hemisphere, cooperation with the Organization of American States that has really been a cornerstone for our regional engagement on cybersecurity and international infrastructure security, 5G, and others. And there's a number of places where our work has been really unique, and a lot of that has to do with our historic focus on building capacity and industrial control systems, and the ability to understand how to employ cybersecurity in these complex industrial environments, since it is such a unique sphere. And if there's a workforce challenge in cybersecurity generally, it is even more compounded when you think about cybersecurity in industrial environments. So we've done a number of partnerships, starting with Japan, to provide ICS training for countries throughout the Indo-Pacific region. We've been doing that actually back as far as 2017. Actually hosted our joint ICS committee that we formed with the private sector, started bringing in a large number of international partners to help present that more unified global picture. And really, these are only some of the examples of how we are working to share threat information, mitigation advice, and best practices with international partners around the world. We really recognize that making our partners more secure has tremendous benefits for us here in the homeland. And I think, as hopefully your students can see, there really are endless opportunities for these efforts, and today the demands in this field have really never been higher. I don't need to cite to you the statistics about the number of unfilled cybersecurity positions around the world and here at home. Needless to say, it is significant. And we here in the federal government are always looking for new cybersecurity talent, and there's always going to be a place for you here. So we'd strongly encourage you to consider joining CISA as you think about what to do and how we can kind of continue to mature and develop our capabilities. We take really great pride in fostering an inclusive, diverse workforce here at CISA. It has been one of the significant initiatives of our new director, Jen Easterly, ensuring that we are able to bring together the kind of unique skills, talents, and expertise, regardless of background. We like to say that really cybersecurity, as much as anything, is really a problem-solving field. It is not just a deep technical field. We need people who can solve problems, and there's endless opportunities if you have the kind of creativity and willing to work hard. Really, the sky's the limit in this field. So if you are interested, would encourage you to go to dhs.gov/cybersecurity service, and there's plenty of opportunities there for you. And I'll just close with saying that come as you are. Your knowledge is really needed, your contributions are going to be valued, and your experiences and perspectives are critical to our success and, frankly, to this broader community's success. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this session today. I wish all of you a great success in your endeavors, both at this conference and beyond. And I thank everyone for their kind of longstanding dedication to this really critical mission. I look forward to working with you now and in the future, and happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wales. We'll open up for a little bit here for questions. Let me start by saying that we very much appreciate all that's being done at CISA and in the government generally. We work with many agencies here at CERIAS. We know the threats that are out there. We very much appreciate how much effort is expended on this. I have to note, as you noted, that CISA is looking for employees. You have many partnerships and advisory people in advisory positions, and have overlooked the preeminent security research and education center in the world, where you're speaking right now. We would very much like to try to set up some better connections. We have people here who've been working in this field for longer than you have, and we also produce a very large number of students. We have affiliations with other government agencies, national labs, and a dozen major corporations. So yeah, just plant that as an idea. And with that, do we have anybody in the audience who has any questions they'd like to ask? If so, please come up to the microphone, because that way we'll be sure that Mr. Wales is able to hear this, and it will make it into the recording. Should be on.
Mr. Wales, this is Mark Probasco with Peraton Corporation. We're working with DHS on the new cloud deployment, building in security into that. One question I've got for you, though, is across departments, we're working on a cultural issue on the sharing of data, especially from the Pentagon, the DoD, the different agencies, having that trust across the branches to share that information that they have. Can you talk about what you're doing to help change that culture? Thank you.
No, that's obviously a good question, and one that the U.S. government has grappled with for a long time. I joined the department in the wake of not too long after 9/11, where kind of the idea of bringing together information to connect the dots so that we don't miss the warning signs of an incident, an impending threat or incident, and that problem has persisted. We're a big government. We've got a lot of information. There's, particularly when you work in the classified realm, there's a lot of different challenges with sharing information broadly. I'd say that there's a couple of different things that we're doing. First is the relationship that we have developed amongst the kind of core cybersecurity agencies. So really us, the FBI, the National Security Agency, again, supported by kind of some folks a little bit, on the periphery of that, like the DNI and Cyber Command and others, have, I think, made great strides in agreeing to more completely share information. It's why we've kind of pulled together this joint cyber defense collaborative. It's how we are trying to expose more data to each other to enable rapid action, all while kind of respecting statutory limitations that have been imposed on us, whether for privacy or civil liberties reasons. So we try to carefully map that. But I think CISA is really in an information sharing, is in a position to advocate for information sharing, both from our private sector partners as well as from the government, and that only by kind of making that information more available can we actually put the pieces together. So I would say, the work that we are doing kind of, bilaterally and jointly with those agencies is making progress. We are actually working, even without a congressional full authorization on this, using our existing authorities to put in place a joint collaborative environment, both an unclassified environment and a classified environment, where more cybersecurity data can be pulled together to look for insights and to enable operations. So that work is literally underway now, taking information that we're pulling in from telemetry across the federal government, with information that's provided by the private sector, with information that we can pull in from our federal interagency partners. So we're trying to make more of that data available for use by government analysts, regardless of where they sit. It's going to take us time. It's going to take a willingness upon all of the agency partners to share that information on an ongoing basis. But I think the more value we show to both our mission and their mission, the more likely that we'll be able to sustain that type of model.
Mr. Wales, Tommy Gardner, I'm a CTO at HP, federal part of HP Incorporated. And I wanted to, you kind of answered part of my question in your previous answer, but cybersecurity is all hands on deck. Everybody's got to play a part. Everybody needs to participate, government, industry, and academia. And that trioca is really critical in working together. What I'd ask you to go into more detail of is, how do you take your relationship from the intelligence community, where a lot of what they're doing is highly classified from sources and methods, and the information flow is very sensitively guarded, and get that out to the general public, particularly academia and industry, most of which don't have the clearances needed to receive all of that information?
Yep. So, and that is something that we are literally working on day in and day out, every single day, which is, how do we take information that's coming from our partners? And that could be intelligence community information that has, we need to protect sources and methods. It could be coming from the private sector, and we need to protect the identity of victims, or protect the privacy rights of individuals who are providing us this information. And so we work extremely hard to say, what is the core information that the network defense community in this country needs to be able to make the improvements inside of their networks to make them more secure and resilient? And oftentimes that does not require the full breadth of information that coming from the intelligence community. It requires kind of bits and pieces of it. But what I would say is that almost every single cybersecurity advisory that the government has released over the past several years, but especially over the past year, has contained significant amounts of formally classified information, or information that was provided to us with certain protections around it from the private sector, or from incident response activities that our hunt and incident response team members kind of collected. So we are making that happen. It's not always, we don't advertise that fact. It's not always apparent in every single document that this is often gleaned from insights gathered from intelligence collection, because we want to make sure really that we are honing in on only the parts that are really most critical. Now, that being said, we often do want to provide members of the private sector a better context about what they're doing, so that they can hunt for the right types of tactics and they're knowing what the adversary is looking to achieve. So we do sponsor clearances for the private sector. And as I said, as part of our Russia-Ukraine outreach campaign, literally have done probably 20 or 30 classified briefings for the private sector, have hit hundreds, if not, low thousands of individuals at a classified level, providing them more detail on what we know, what specific Russian intelligence service cyber actors are doing, what their specific goals and aims might be, what tactics they're using. That way, when they see the unclassified, they see the public advisories, they have more context, they understand where that's coming from, and actually then they could also be a powerful voice in amplifying that information within their communities. And so we try to take a multi-pronged approach at this, but it is definitely something that requires kind of constant work and attention. We're not able to always get all the information we need downgraded, but we've had great success in pushing out a lot more information at the unclassified public level to enable enhanced cybersecurity.
Good morning. My name is Jim Larams. I'm graduate faculty here at Purdue, as well as a CERIAS scholar. What type of PhD positions are you looking at filling at CISA?
So the truth is, there's no one kind. I mean, obviously, folks who have kind of deeper technical expertise in relevant fields in computer science and in artificial intelligence and machine learning, there's obviously a place here for that type of technical background, but we have a wide variety of positions that are going to work and support the cybersecurity community. We have people who work on outreach and engagement, building partnerships with the private sector. We have people who are working on building and doing technical reference architectures for our next generation detection platforms. We have people who are working on policy and strategy. And really, so there is nearly an endless number of people who will be directly involved in the cybersecurity work. And it doesn't require someone who can code in 5 languages and write their own snort rules in their spare time. We are really looking for kind of all hands on deck. And frankly, a lot of the work, if you're smart and you're eager, a lot of the basics we can teach you, and the kind of on-the-job training can be really tremendous. So encourage folks to apply, and undoubtedly there'll be a place for you here.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Joe Maida. I have a startup that's based in Austin and also in DC. We're advancing patented counter-threat network software. What is the best place for the point of injection for consideration of innovative, disruptive software within this community in the space?
You mean for the federal government, or you just mean generally, where are we seeing kind of next generation problems and solutions?
So right. So for cross-domain solutions, all of the issues that you've touched upon that are very relevant and emerging, where is the best place for startups to present that and innovative companies to submit that for consideration?
Yeah, so that's good, and we can provide to the CERIAS team and get you some information about how to provide information to us. I'd say that we work in kind of 2 different venues, kind of directly. One is we get a lot of, obviously, solicitations about new and innovative ideas in cybersecurity. We try to pull those together and then have sessions where we have folks come in and brief the entire team. We do that to protect ourselves and to protect the vendors because of kind of procurement rules. We want to make sure that we don't do things inappropriate and actually end up excluding people from being able to compete for certain contracts down the road. So we've got a fairly structured process by which we can take in that information and have folks come in and demonstrate the kind of new and innovative thinking. But in addition, we have a close partnership with the Office of Science and Technology at the Department of Homeland Security, where we've kind of go through kind of a list of priority areas where we think we need new and innovative thinking, and they put out kind of broad research grants to both academic and private sector institutions, and kind of look for budding talent. They have some kind of unique procurement authorities that allow them to kind of tap into that community and access it a little bit more quickly. So we try to use a variety of different tools and processes, but we can certainly get you more information about how to get into that process for us.
Very good. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Wales. My name is Michael Reeves. I'm from San Diego National Labs. I work in cybersecurity initiatives, research and development. And so my question is kind of different from a lot of the other ones that have come up today. I know the federal government over the years has started up many different cybersecurity initiatives that focus on various pieces of federal government infrastructure that helps secure and protect the nation. And so underneath CISA right now, there are 8 or so different programs that all deal with different pieces of federal infrastructure. Are there plans in CISA to tie these pieces together and make them all work together? Because right now they're all very separate and they don't really talk together. So there's one issue there. And then the second thing is CISA working on their own initiatives to create pipelines to help communication and collaboration across these different efforts.
Sure. No, so it is a good point, and it's a good question. And we have taken a hard look over the past 18 months at our architecture for protecting the federal civilian executive branch and the tools and systems that we utilize. So, obviously a number of these different programs kind of serve different purposes, but with the ultimate goal of strengthening our cybersecurity. We are now looking at ways in which, as you noted, to kind of make sure that these are able to be integrated in a more cohesive way. So that the 2 flagship programs for a long time at the macro level for our federal cybersecurity have been what's called the Einstein program, which is actually somewhat of a misnomer because it contains a variety of kind of different types of capabilities, and our continuous diagnostics and mitigation program, which really is a vehicle to provide agencies with technology that enables them to do different types of IT operations, whether it's asset management and software management or patch management inside of their networks. What we are doing, and thanks to Congress by providing us some additional authorities at the beginning of 2020 and some additional funding as part of the American Rescue Plan Act in early 2021, we are able to kind of jumpstart an effort to kind of pull these together in what we call our mission systems engineering environment. Part of this required us to be able to actually gain access to all the continuous diagnostics and mitigation data. Previously, we were only able to get very limited summary data, and agencies themselves kept the detailed object level data, which would prevent us from being able to kind of correlate threat information that we are seeing at the boundary with information that's happening inside of federal agency networks. We've now kind of under the executive order and using some authorities that Congress provided, able to kind of gain access to object level data. So now we are working on automation in a kind of meaningful. At the same time, through the American Rescue Plan Act, we are kind of moving away from a heavy focus on boundary level security into the interior with endpoint detection and response tooling and sensing technologies that we're deploying more consistently throughout the federal agencies. Now, again, we probably are never going to be in a position where we are fully ingesting the full pipe of every EDR endpoint of every federal agency, given the millions of endpoints that exist throughout the federal government. But our goal is to have that information kind of stored at a designated point inside of an agency with the ability for CISA to kind of tap into that store, run analytics on it, and then pull back data that we actually need into our environment. And so we are, at the same time, we have to do the same thing in cloud, agency cloud environments that don't necessarily accept the same type of sensing and tooling technology. So we're working in this environment to be able to kind of create an analytic platform that can tie into these different tools without having to create the mother of all databases that would be both a massive target and probably impossible to administer. So in some respects, this is an incredibly challenging problem given the diversity of technology that we are going to be dealing with. So we're doing a variety of things that are probably going to get way too in the weeds in terms of putting on small overlays on top of everyone's EDR platform to take out kind of a subset of data so that we can use that more efficiently across different types of EDR technologies, whether they're using CrowdStrike Falcon or they're using Palo Alto XDR. I mean, there's different platforms, and we want to be able to take a kind of core set of data from all of them to be able to run analytics in a consistent way across this environment inside of this new mission systems engineering environment. And that work is literally underway right now. That system will probably be at least partially up and running at an initial operating capability early next year, taking initial streams of data, but we're actually piloting the actual underlying technology work and the underlying kind of data architecture this year in a handful of federal agencies now. So I think we're making progress. The biggest challenge really is the government scale and the ability to kind of get consistency at scale when you think about the fact that there are actually 101 federal civilian executive branch agencies, all with their own unique authority and responsibility for their IT and cybersecurity. And then when you go to some large agency like a NASA or DHS or Department of Justice, and you have all the sub-cabinet agencies and bureaus, et cetera, who all are kind of masters of their own fiefdom, it complicates this problem even further. And so we've been spending a lot of time kind of building the relationships necessary for us to kind of create a more cohesive architecture on the technical side, because in many respects, the policy and relationship challenges make the technology challenges pale by comparison. But I do think that SolarWinds was somewhat of a game changer, both in kind of creating momentum at the federal level in terms of new authorities, direction from the White House, resources for CISA to enable us to kind of put in place what we think will be a more kind of modern architecture to allow us to hunt consistently and persistently in federal networks, and to do so in a more consistent way with better access to detailed object level data in those networks. I'm sorry, that was a long question, but a long answer. That was a kind of a complicated, deep question that really is one of significant focus area inside of this agency.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
I realize that your time is limited with us today. We seem to have gone through the questions in the audience. I did have one thing that I wanted to ask, if you have comments.
Sure thing.
Over the last couple of years, we've had keynote talks from Chris Inglis and Rob Joyce, and conversations with them. They're longtime friends of the center, and CISA and many initiatives and other agencies have been focused on detection and response, faster patching, faster identification, capture of information to look for intrusions, with very little done to try to prevent those things in the first place by having better software, better architectures, better organization. We continue to build on broken legacy systems and act like we're surprised when something happens. So right now it's a very high tempo environment for CISA, but are there plans to do something to actually help change the ecosystem so that we aren't continually depending on these broken legacy platforms?
It's an excellent question, and it's one that featured very prominently in the executive order signed by President Biden last May in terms of how do we move to an environment of more secure software development upfront. So I would say that there's kind of, let's cover two pieces here. The first is we are working very closely with NIST, who is kind of taken leadership on this issue to put in place what are the, using their standard processes about kind of creating standards for secure software development. We're working closely with them on that as they can kind of continue to build that out. Second, we are working to kind of use the power of the federal government's purchasing to kind of help move the community in this direction. So we are working with the council that manages the federal acquisition regulations. So all the rules governing how the federal government buys and procures anything to ensure that there are new rules in place that the US government will require secure software development before it will purchase software in the future. And we think that that could result in kind of a sea change, as companies are not going to obviously have two development platforms. And if they develop it securely for the federal government, it will have follow-on effects for the broader community. We're obviously also working on a number of kind of tangential and related issues where we have more of a leadership role, including concepts like a software bill of materials, recognizing that that is not necessarily prevention up front, but allows kind of faster mitigation on the back end, as you can identify if there are components that have potential vulnerabilities in them down the road. But we all think that this is part of an effort to kind of push on the secure software development side. I think the aftermath of the Log4Shell vulnerability and the push on what we can do to make open source software more secure, both from the federal government as well as kind of big tech companies who are willing to kind of invest some of their own money and resources in helping, could again, I think help this problem, but it is a challenging one. And it's not one where there are, I think there are kind of easy answers where we've got them. It is one that's going to require multiple different parts of the federal government working closely together. I know Chris Inglis, he and I have talked about this specific problem, and it's one of the areas that I think he's going to have the National Cyber Director's Office focus a bit more attention on, as it is a place where there appears to be a gap in the federal government's ability to kind of take action at the scale and speed necessary to have an impact. But certainly if there are ideas out there on how we can more effectively address this, if there are authorities and tools the federal government can bring to bear to assist, would really love kind of innovative thinking from places like yours to kind of help us go in the right direction.
Thank you very much. And thank you for both the commitment to our shared and mutual security, and for willing to take the time out to speak to us today. We very much appreciate it. We hope you can come visit in person sometime.
Would love to.
Next year's our 25th anniversary of the center. We're going to have a lot of people here for that, but you're welcome anytime. And for the audience, let's thank Mr. Wales for his time today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.